But this is a story about a diary study. So it's a project that Kate and I have been working on. And so this is one of the images from our diary study. Next slide.
Excuse me, can you just tell me what a diary study is?
Sure. A diary study is it's a type of cultural probe. I'm really conscious of time here, so let me go through the slides if they come up. Okay. Second one. So this study is a special study in that it was done with people who are supporting a loved one in detention. And it's a diary as you think of a normal diary. So somebody keeping a track or an account of the actions that they have been doing over a period of time. So it's longitudinal. The idea, as Jax was saying, you can have interviews or focus groups or even shadowing people, but in some circumstances it's not appropriate. As technology's moved out of the workplace and moved into our personal lives and social lives, and in particular sensitive areas in hospitals, in detention centres, with people visiting people in detention centres, if you tag along with them, you mess up the visit. If you ask them afterwards, they're generally upset. So it doesn't work. So what you do is you take the tools that you would use and you hand them over to the participant. You hand them over a diary and they fill it in themselves, in their own time and in their own way. The huge advantage is it's one of the least intrusive methods of collecting data. A big minus is that it's hard to control the data, and often you get a huge amount of data and it's really messy and only part of it is relevant to what you want. Anyway, this story, I'll just back one, a little bit more context about this. Hurried along. No, that's fine. We wanted to understand the physical, emotional, relationship and family aspects of visiting somebody. There's a bigger project that we're involved in which is about the use of audio-visual links and audio-visual services right throughout the justice sector and system, and so this is one thread of that. And really it was an investigation to understand could audio-visual play a part in facilitating people communicating with their loved ones in detention centres. So that's the premise of it. And you can see from the diary here, or the excerpt from one of the diaries, they're fairly harrowing and heart-wrenching sort of things, these diaries. Next slide. Participants. So, and because the orientation of this session is around ethics and so on, I'm going to focus more on how we did it and how we dealt with the ethics rather than the results of the thing. But happy to talk about that afterwards as well. So participants, where do you get these people? You can't just ring up a recruitment agency or anything like that. So we work through an organisation, a not-for-profit organisation called the Community Restorative Centre, who specifically deal with supporting prisoners, ex-prisoners and their families. We recruited a broad set of people. It was a qualitative study, so we recruited 7 people. 1 dropped out partway through, so we had 6 people. And so we were looking at getting 6 diaries. And these people were very diverse in terms of their age, who they were caring for in the detention centre. So there was a mother caring for an adult son, grandparents caring for grandchildren, a mother with young children, mother with older children. It does tend to be women and families rather than men. The vast majority of people in detention in New South Wales and Australia are men, so if you look to be representative, it's primarily women, and with our 6 people, they were all women and families as it happened. Next slide, please. So just the ethics around this. There was a rigorous identification and consent process, so we weren't allowed to just go in and they didn't give us a list of names to talk to. They asked, and this is not being done through a university, so it wasn't a formal ethics procedure as a university would require, but we tried to keep to something fairly similar. So we had a 1-page explanation, non-technical, of what the project was all about, which we gave our CRC social workers, and they approached potential participants for this, explaining it to them, and if they were interested, then we were allowed to approach them. The consent form had to be passed through them and checked to see that it was correct. We had strict confidentiality surrounding all the participant information, so it's not on any government system, it's held on standalone computers. and it'll be destroyed when we finish using it. The participants there were other smaller things where we pay the participants as you would a normal market rates for doing this type of study, but in sections. So if they chose to drop out at any time, it was easy to do that. They didn't have to wait to get paid at the end. And you might do that in a commercial environment. We went the other way with this. And the data was fully anonymised. So these images here and these names are not the people. They are people who are similar. These are images under Creative Commons from Flickr. And the names are not representative, and we also removed all of the dates. We kept the places where they were visiting, so the particular centre that they were visiting. Next slide, please. The diary, how do we set up this diary? So if you think about the context of a family and people, a diary, as you think of like a work diary, we didn't want something like that. We wanted something that would work with a family, that the entire family could contribute to. So we produced a scrapbook. It has thick pages. You write on one side. There's the opportunity to put stickers on it. Children are actively encouraged to add notes, drawings and stickers onto the other side. So we wanted to get the story. There's stickers here, coloured pens. We used a box. Finally wrapped the thing up and put it in a box, so if people had a story about, say, going to a detention centre and having rubbish food from a vending machine or something like that, they could put the wrapper in and tell us the story. So that's how we set these diaries up. Next slide, please. The method we used, we had an initial briefing during the recruitment stage, so we had talked to people for about an hour about what this was all about, handed over the diary. The diaries were kept over 1 or 2 visits to a detention centre. We kept a fairly loose timetable on when we wanted the diaries back. It was a couple of months or so. We didn't hold to a tight time. It was whenever people were ready to send them back. And we asked for entries before, during and after visits. And then finally, if people were up for it, once they'd sent the diary back, we contacted them and asked them if they were happy to have a debrief interview, where we asked them, we used the diary itself as a structure for the interview, asking them more about visiting, ringing, and how they would feel about using audio-visual links to communicate with their loved one. Next slide, please. Analysis. I'll shut up now. Kate's turn.
Thanks, John. So with analysis, we basically read through each of the diaries together, and we pulled out the salient points onto sticky notes, and we used those to do some affinity work on the wall. But then also what we did, that was to pull out sort of the main themes and implications of what we were seeing. But then what we did was created, what you see here is each column is the 4 pages belonging to one diary participant. So we pulled out the demographics of that person, where the loved one was, how they were travelling to see them. We then pulled out issues and concerns and pain points that were prevalent as part of these visits, and it became very evident in these diaries that going out and travelling was very onerous, it's very taxing, and it was a very upsetting experience overall for the people reporting. We then pulled out the vision of what these people thought, how ABL might actually help sustain these communications with them, with their loved ones inside the prison facilities. And so that really gives us an idea of things we can go up and explore in our designs as we continue to pursue this project and as we roll it into other things that we're thinking about as part of this overall audiovisual service that we're helping to design for the New South Wales Department of Justice. What we've ended up compiling as a result of these is profiles. So we have these 2-pager profiles. So John's showing here the first page of this. So we have the representative image over on the left. We have the person's sort of facts and stats, if you like. Where do they live? What kind of makeup is their family? Whatnot. A key quote that sort of identifies the key issues for them and who they are. Then we have a narrative which goes across 2 pages as to what the experience is like for visiting in person, what it's like to make a phone call, and things that they have in mind for how ABL may facilitate this communication and this interaction. We also have snippets of items from the diaries as well. And we've got these placed around our office over in the Downing Centre. And when people come in, they always stop and pause and read these because they are offered a very rich narrative. And they offer the human story around the technology, which often people are a little bit sort of narrow in thinking exclusively about videos and screens and monitors and courts and legal and prisons. But at the heart of it all is the people that we're, inside the system and how we can help support them and their families. So, yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. So, John, you want to talk about these?
So, very quickly, talk about findings. There's a lot about this, and I don't think this session is all about that, more about the ethics, but phone, we looked at phone and visiting and then audiovisual. Phone provides immediate insights into lives and situations. It's that snapshot thing. It's not so much associated with privilege. Prisoners are allowed to call out when, more or less, when they like 6-minute blocks. You know, you get an immediate snapshot. The person might be in a supermarket, something like that, and you just find out what's going on. Issues with phone are around brevity of the call, the 6 minutes, lack of cut-off warning, lack of privacy and cost. How are we doing for time?
We've got 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Physical visiting, so let's move on to visiting. The bottom line for all of this is that visiting and physical contact is irreplaceable. So that's what all our participants said. However, visiting is also an emotional roller coaster. A big high planning the visit and before the visit, lots of organisation, often lots of cost, can be 8 or 9 hours travelling overnight sometimes, and at the centres are often a big load, 2 hours or sometimes more to get through the procedures, be identified, go through the drug searches, all the rest of it, dog searches sometimes before you can visit. Then the high of the visit, and then emotional and upset, and down again after the visit. Significant effort involved in planning, and there's issues with travelling procedures and treatment at detention centres. So there's a bunch of stuff, and a quote about the roller coaster. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so with regards to implications, I mean, again, this is very specific to the project we're working on, but it helps us, having done this research and having looked at the outcomes of these things for the families, is there's very clear pointers now for how we should approach it from a design perspective. So the clear visibility of a loved one and how they look, and knowing that they're well, and being able to feel confident and happy once you walk away from that interaction is critical. So that talks to the video technologies and how we need to frame the person in the screen and where they sit and that kind of thing. We might also look at reversing the context of the visits, and perhaps the loved one can actually be brought into the home in some fashion, so that they can actually be exposed to seeing what the kids are doing in terms of drawings, play, even sharing homework, that kind of thing. So we're just trying to reframe things as a result of the research that we've done. The home also, as a bit of a temporary public space, was an interesting idea that John came up with, which is regards to, because you're bringing aspects of the prison into your home and you're being monitored as part of this audio-visual system, what implications does that have? And I think the key thing there at the end, and John can talk to it for a moment, is that it's a new form of communication that we've sort of working on as a concept as a result of this social research.
Yeah, so if you think about a phone call and the connotations that it has, it's immediate, it's ad hoc, it's short, it's audio only. It doesn't need much planning. You think of a visit, the connotations that has, it's more of a privilege. It's something that needs planning. It's something that has that huge thing of the physical contact. And where does audiovisual stand in that? Is it a phone call? Is it an audiovisual call, or is it an audiovisual visit? And about half our participants viewed it as one thing, half viewed it the other. Some viewed it to replace some of the phone calls, some viewed it to supplement some of the visits. So what we're thinking is to think of audiovisual as neither, but as a new and different form of communication, which has its own advantages and disadvantages. It temporarily will take the detainee out of the detention centre, but it doesn't have the physical touch. And so it should have different rules and different procedures associated with it. So for our input back into the project, we would advise that the people who organise this service, should it be built, do it with that premise in mind in the first place, that it is a new form of communication with new procedures, not treated like a call and not treated like a visit specifically. Next slide.
This is our very final slide. Something we wanted to leave with you guys as a reflection is the issues that are bound up around people's motivations for participating in something like this in the first place. A couple of our colleagues presented at Service Design in Government in London a couple of weeks ago. One person pointed out that sometimes people participate in activities such as the one we've just run because it's a means, they're so desperate for some way of sort of seeking a solution to problems that it's their only means of accessing that. So we have had some exposure where people have reached out to us to say, can you help us in some way with regards to the person who's inside the prison facility. And of course, as researchers, we can't assist with that, but it's something to be aware of when you get involved in these kinds of projects, that people will reach out to you for these kinds of things. Another thing is the sensitivity and security of the data. So obviously we're dealing with things here which are critical in terms of people's safety and knowing people's whereabouts and locations. So it we can't overstress enough the importance of everything that's been collected, and anonymisation, and also the security and policies around how you choose to share, store your data and share it and whatnot is critical. The final one is, as part of this kind of research into these social things, which are distressing. I mean, I got physically upset a few times when I read these diaries, and when we talk about them, people quite often get a bit teary-eyed, is debriefing the experience with others, and also as an ethical thing, and this is something from an AusCai conference that I attended in Melbourne late last year, I don't know if any of you were there. It was about ethics of research with vulnerable witnesses, is that they form a connection with you and they share things with you, but then when you exit the project, they don't have that same sense of, cutting off of the project and the end of the project, whereas we do as researchers. So there's some knock-on effects there which are worthy of sort of making sure people take care of themselves, maybe debrief with a mentor, with a peer, write your own diaries, that kind of thing. So these are messy and complex problems, as they said at the top, and they're incredibly interesting to design for, but we have to take care of ourselves as well as part of that. So I think that's our. If you just move to the final picture there, and that's just so you know where we got our pictures from. And the last slide is, there you go. That's the snapshot from one of the diaries we used, the stickies there. So thank you very much for having us.
So if you guys want to grab a drink or something, in a couple of minutes, Charmaine's going to talk about some of her experiences in Patagonia.